What's going on, Raptors fans? Welcome to the first episode of Tactic Talk. Now, Tactic Talk is a series I'm going to bring to the channel where over the course of the season, I talk about different tactical things that come up in Raptors games that I think are interesting. And I think people that, if you didn't play basketball growing up or if you didn't bother to look these things up, you really have no real reason to stumble into these concepts and figure out what they are or how to identify them on the basketball court when you're watching the game. So, over the course of the season, when I think interesting things come up and things worth talking happen during the games, I'll try to make these kind of videos. I'm starting today with a video on the 2-3 zone defense. So before I start, I just want to make clear, I didn't play the game at a particularly high level. And I'm not a coach by any means. So I'm attempting to give like a very basic, brief overview of the concept. You can look up what a 2-3 zone defense is and find all kinds of amazing resources that give way more detailed explanations, a lot more nuanced of a discussion of the concept, and way more different outcomes. So different intricacies to how you can play the defense and different intricacies to how you can beat the defense. So if this stuff interests you, definitely go look them up. But I'm only here to just give a basic overview, and you guys can take it from there. So, a 2-3 zone defense. Why am I talking about it? The reason I'm talking about it is because the Raptors run into it a lot. A lot of other teams, when in need, when they're struggling against us, resort to a 2-3 zone defense to try to give us some trouble. And I think the most significant instance of it was the game against the Sixers where we lost, where Maxey scored 40 points. In that game, the Raptors ran into the 2-3 zone because that's what Doc Rivers decided to do. So, what is the 2-3 zone? It's a zone defense. And what does that mean? That means that the defenders, they're not in charge of guarding players. They're in charge of guarding space. And whatever player ends up in their space, that's who they're in charge of guarding on in that moment. And obviously, they can be tasked with guarding different players depending on where different offensive players end up. Why is it called the 2-3 zone? Quite simply, because there's a 2, and behind them, there's a 3. So you put your backcourt players, your guards, roughly in this location, and you put your forwards and your centers over here. So you put your center in front of the rim, you got the forwards beside them. So what's the point of a 2-3 zone? The point is to put your big players within a pretty close proximity of the basket. The aim here is to take away good looks at the basket and make it hard for the other team to generate clean looks at the basket. And the reason for putting 3 defenders here is so that the center, the main rim protector, first of all, 3 in the key is a thing in the NBA, so he can't just camp out here. He's going to have to move eventually. And the offense moving the ball might dictate that the zone has to shift as a whole. So by a zone shifting, I mean if the attacking players end up, let's say, like this, the zone may have to move like this. So in this event, this player had to come out and deal with the 3-point shooter in the corner. The center has to shift over. But because there's a third guy here, this guy can shift in and take care of the basket. So basically, however the zone moves, because there's 3 guys at the base, there should always be somebody at the basket in theory. So with that being said, the question becomes, how do you deal with a zone defense? And the main 2 things you do are have good 3-point shooters and have one player that's a reliable shooter from the high post area, who's also a good passer. So what do I mean by that? One of the things you can do, actually, I'll just take us right back to this situation, right? So let's say you have 3-point threats over here. So that dictates the zone has to shift. This guy has to move a little bit here. This guy has to move a little bit here. Let's say the ball is with this guy in the corner. You've successfully made the zone basically leave this 3-point shooter. Again, the assumption here are your perimeter guys are 3-point shooters. The ball can be swung from here to here to here. And being that the ball always moves faster than people, this guy will probably have an open shot. Even though this guy will close out to him eventually, it'll probably be a fairly uncontested three. So that's one way that shooting can impact how you play this type of defense, right? The other way that shooting impacts things is in the ideal shape when playing a 2-3 zone. So if you can get into what they call a 1-3-1, where you have two players on the wings, one guy at the top of the three, one guy in the heart of the 2-3 zone, which is the location, by the way, that the zone is trying to keep a player out of because of how dangerous they can possibly be. But yeah, if you can end up in this type of situation, right, the zone isn't intended for these guys to come out like this. Now, if they have to, they will. But the point is if you can have this type of alignment of players and the ball ends up here, at this point, there's going to be a pass to somebody behind them that's going to result in a wide open three. And in the case that one of these guys gets pulled out to the side, you've basically bent the zone out of shape and you've opened up space for guys underneath to potentially get a look at the basket. But yeah, if you can put three-point shooters over here, you introduce a bit of a headache to a team trying to run this defense. But yeah, even out of this shape, the dangerous part about putting a player in this place over here is that it's intuitively it's nobody's zone, right? This is kind of the border between everyone's zones, right? If you factor in this guy is meant to guard this guy's meant to guard this guy's meant to guard this guy's meant to generally guard this guy's meant to guard this. This is kind of like the region in the middle, like a dead zone, where it's kind of nobody's zone. So somebody has to commit to this player to stop this player from having an outright just open shot from right here, right? It makes no sense for these players to collapse down from behind. That's not really like an effective way to impact the shot. What these guys' role in defending a player getting here is that their job is to try to deny passes into this area. So if, let's say, this player is, like, let's say that this is their spot. This guy has the ball. This player, in guarding him, is going to be concerned with getting his hands in the passing lane here to stop the pass into this player. This player is probably going to have an eye on the guy with the ball over here. In the event that the ball comes down to the guy in the middle, this guy might jump the passing lane. But the point is that these two players are concerned with not letting the ball getting into that area. Once the ball gets here, if it does, what has to happen is this player realistically has to come up to stop the player from taking an open shot. Ultimately, they're the closest player to this guy. This is a longer closeout. It'll take longer for this guy to get here, giving this guy more time to get their shot off, right? So, ball gets here. This guy has to step up. That leaves the rim vacated. So, if this guy catches the defender of this zone slipping, they can cut behind them and make themselves open for a pass right at the basket. It's an easy dunk. We actually saw this like more than a few times between Thad Young and Chris Boucher. Thad Young would end up in the middle of the zone. The rim protector would end up coming out to get him. Chris Boucher would tuck him behind. Easy three, no problem. Obviously, it's not going to always work that simple. If this player tracks the runner, they vacated this entire space over here. Drift to the corner, you have an open three. If when drifting to the corner, this guy follows you, the guys basically put this defender here in a predicament where they have to be responsible for two players. This guy moves here, this guy moves here, this guy's in trouble. And at this point, this isn't even a zone anymore because it's been bent out of shape. Defenders are in all kinds of different areas. They're scrambling. You've essentially busted the zone in this situation. So that is the danger that can happen when a player gets the ball here. But the key here is that this player needs to be effective at making the shot to force the defender in front of them to respect it. They also have to be good at passing / facilitating / playmaking, however you want to word it, right? They have to be able to look at the players in front of them, process what's happening, identify what the correct pass is, and execute the pass, because a lot of different things could happen, and you have to understand pretty quickly in a matter of moments what the right pass is and to be able to pull the pass off. So it's important to have a player that's both a dynamic shooter and a dynamic passer out of this area here. So with that being said, we've covered what a what a 2-3 zone is, what it attempts to do, and generally the effective ways of dealing with it. Now, specifically looking at the Raptors, you have to think about who fits the different profiles of the dangerous players to a 2-3 zone. Who fits the guy being in the middle? Now, we saw Thad Young play that role last year, but the reality is he doesn't make this shot at a particularly high rate, and that's why teams are willing to zone our bench. The one guy who hits this shot at a high rate and has the passing ability is Pascal Siakam. Pascal Siakam, you can look at the shot charts on StatMuse. You go to the website and you look up Pascal Siakam shot chart or OG Anunoby shot chart. You can look at all our players. Last year and this year, the player that hits shots out of this area at a high rate is Pascal Siakam. If you watch the games, you see that Scottie has the potential to be highly effective from this area, but statistically, it hasn't happened yet. I'm confident he'll be reliable as a scorer and shooter from this area at some point. It just hasn't happened yet. So really, that leaves Pascal as the one dangerous player from here. And then if you think about how the other effective way is through three-point shooting, look at the reliable three-point shooters we have. If you look at the stats for three-point shooting last year and the stats for this year so far, the reliable three-point shooters are OG, Gary Trent, and Fred VanVleet. Now, I think Otto Porter Jr. fits the mold as well, but ultimately, we haven't seen him play yet. And hopefully, when he gets back, he's still the shooter he's always been his whole career. But with that being said, there's three reliable shooters. A guy like Precious didn't start out the season shooting well from three last year, was hot for a while, and now this year isn't shooting particularly well. You look at a guy like Scottie, had his ups and downs from three last year and is really hot so far. But again, neither of these guys are reliable three-point shooters the way that OG, Fred, and Gary Trent are, or the way Otto Porter has been in his whole career. So this is where you kind of begin to see what the issue is. And the issue is that our effective players in playing this kind of defense are Pascal, OG, Gary Trent, and Fred VanVleet, our starting lineup, right? So when we go to our bench players, it makes a ton of sense to take this kind of approach to playing us. And ultimately, as our players grow and as we get Otto Porter Jr. back, that would help. But for right now, if you look at it, the only real solution to not end up in this type of situation is to stagger our rotations or to stagger our substitutions in a way that keeps at least two of Fred, OG, Gary Trent, and Pascal Siakam on the court at all times. The problem there is when you stagger it like that, you make it hard to get them all on the court at once for extended periods of time. And ultimately, those are our most effective lineups, right? But if you stagger them, you don't get those effective lineups that often. And if you don't stagger them, you do leave a certain amount of minutes where the bench is going to play. And that bench is going to run into issues against this type of defense if Precious isn't having a good shooting night, if Boucher isn't having a good shooting night. This is an effective way to play us in that event. So, if you look at the solution is internal growth of players, which comes with time, or adding new players. I don't think staggering our substitutions to put at least two of those four players on the court at once is a great idea. I would rather be able to have extended periods of time where they're all on the court so we can do really well in those moments. But you see why teams resort to this, and if you see it work effectively, I hope this video can help you understand why. But this is a thing we run into. This is a thing that's been put on tape. Teams know that they can run this effectively. And ultimately, there's always going to be moments in our season until certain players get better that we'll see this defense again. So if you have any other details or nuances or tidbits about a 2-3 zone that you know that I may have missed, feel free to put that in the comments. If there's any other concepts you guys think that you might have heard of but you don't really know, put that in the comments as well. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I can't wait for episode 2, and I'll catch you guys around. If you like this video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave your thoughts in the comments, and find me on all socials at Toronto Hoop Talk.